A holiday turned into a nightmare when a mother woke up, convinced something was wrong, and it was. The gruesome events of the night would lay shrouded in mystery for 36 years. But all those years ago, in 1984, a little girl decided she would help find the perpetrator, and she did, as an investigator. On Thanksgiving evening in 1984, 14-year-old Wendy Jerome left her friend's house in Rochester, New York, but never made it home. Wendy and her father Wayne had cooked Thanksgiving dinner together. It was a heartwarming thing. Wendy's mom worked as a nurse. She had a tough routine, working at the Beechwood nursing home. After dinner, Wendy was helping out her father with the dishes while her mother went to take a nap upstairs. The two planned to eat dessert once the dishes were done and Marlene had awakened from her nap. Her little brother Bill was playing. Born on November 1st, 1970, Wendy had just turned 14 years old a few days ago. She had some independence since her birthday and wanted to do things on her own. Wendy asked her father if she could walk over to her friend Susie Keller's house. It was not that far, just a few blocks away. It was her friend's birthday the following day, and Wendy wanted to give her a birthday card. Wayne allowed it since her curfew was 8 p.m. anyway, and it was 7, which meant she would be back in no time. Waking up with a sudden, overwhelming urge to find her daughter, Marlene was uneasy. She had a bad feeling and ran down the stairs, hastily asking, "Where is Wendy?" Wayne reassured Marlene that Wendy was visiting a friend and would be home soon, urging her not to worry. By 8:15 p.m., panic set in, as Wendy was still not home. It was only 15 minutes past her curfew, but it was still worrisome as she was never late. Early maybe, but never late. They began calling the Keller family but received no answer. Hours passed before they finally reached them. Marlene's first question was, "Is Wendy with you?" Susie's mother paused in shock and said, "Marlene, hang up the phone and call the police right now." A short while later, Marlene's worst fears were confirmed when Wendy was found in an alcove alongside School 33. A 22-year-old discovered her lifeless body between schools 33 and 11. He said that he was heading to a bar when he noticed someone lying down, so he left it alone, initially assuming they were drunk. Upon closer inspection, he saw blood. Afraid, he went to a friend's house before returning to the scene to confirm what he saw, prior to contacting the police. Officers on the scene realized she was no more and that she had been brutally assaulted and left to take her last agonizing breaths alone. In 5 minutes, police were at Marlene's door, and they told her what happened to Wendy. According to her mother, the schoolyard where Wendy's body was discovered was not on her route to Susie's house. Marlene believes that Wendy, nearing her curfew, may have attempted to visit another friend in the neighborhood and took a shortcut by the school. The initial investigation revealed severe blunt force trauma, including a fractured skull from a significant blow. She had been assaulted. Dr. Nicholas Forbes conducted a medical examination of Wendy's body and determined that severe blunt force trauma to her skull had finally taken her life. Wendy's autopsy further revealed that at least 2 different types of objects were used to cause her bruises and wounds. They could also have been hands. The marks were distinct. They were both blunt force trauma with any object and sharp force trauma caused by something that would cut through her body. It could have been a knife or a piece of glass. The family could not overcome this tragedy. Wayne and Marlene divorced because deep down she blamed her husband for what happened. Bill Jerome, Wendy's brother, was afraid of everything after his elder sister was so brutally taken. He was afraid that the assailant was still out there, running free. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of the dark. He would hardly go out to play, and when he did, he was afraid and wary of everyone around him. After the divorce, Wayne moved to Florida. Marlene was not content with what the police were doing. Nearly a decade passed, and Marlene fought hard to know more details of the night. She was not allowed to see the crime scene, visit the body in the morgue, or even look at the photos. Marlene demanded to see the crime scene photos after investigators had informed her that Wendy was unconscious and unaware of what had happened to her that day. They said she passed peacefully. Once she got a copy of the autopsy report, it turned out she was in the dark. Reading the autopsy report repeatedly mentioning defense wounds, Marlene became furious. She felt betrayed, believing they had misled her when she had directly asked them about Wendy's struggle with her assailant. She felt deeply betrayed. Once she saw the photos, she had some closure. She had imagined Wendy to be lying exposed for the world to see, undressed, indecent, in a way she would never have wanted to be seen. Marlene suffered for 9 long years before she saw the photos and found a bit of comfort. The photos also showed Marlene what investigators had known all along. Wendy had been dressed, wearing jeans and a brown sweater jacket adorned with unicorns and hearts. Her pink hoodie, which she always carried with her, was placed over her battered face. So whoever committed the heinous act allowed Wendy to get dressed before taking her life so brutally. The investigators had promised Marlene that Wendy went in peace and knew nothing of what happened to her later, including all the blows to her head. But the presence of defensive wounds told a story of absolute terror, as Wendy would have fought for her life. Completely aware of what was happening to her, contrary to what the investigators told Marlene. Each birthday, November the 1st, it was hard for the family. They would cry, and they would miss Wendy. But Marlene believed one day the perpetrator would be brought to justice. Back in the 80s and 90s, DNA technology was in its initial phases, but years later, forensics would have a chance to bring the perpetrator to justice. Officer Paul Boccaccino spoke to at least 30 people from the neighborhood 6 days after Wendy's tragic demise. The investigation officers also took care to preserve the evidence. The crime scene included objects like a cigarette pack, a lighter, the hair of the perpetrator, and Wendy's clothes. There were some things not investigated enough. The witness was interviewed, but he was not a prime suspect. The fact that he first went to a friend's house, then came back to the crime scene was entirely suspicious. The witness also had the exact same hair type found at the crime scene. He should have been investigated further. 6 years later, he took his own life. Was that an admission of guilt? Initially, investigators focused on another local man who claimed he had been assaulted that night, but was eliminated via blood typing analysis. In 1984, when Julie Hahn was just 11 years old, she learned about the tragic slaying of Wendy Jerome, a case that would deeply impact her and eventually shape her career. Wendy's case haunted Rochester for years, becoming a significant part of the community's consciousness. This early exposure to such a haunting event instilled in Hahn a sense of justice and a drive to pursue a career where she could make a difference. Years later, she became a chief prosecutor in the Major Felony Bureau of the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. Her commitment to justice led her to work on Wendy's case starting in 2011. She went through everything with a fresh perspective and was able to conduct DNA analysis. This included cross-checking the witness who took his own life's DNA. Should the DNA not match with the witness, Hahn had plans to analyze other items found at the scene, such as the cigarette pack and lighter, using advanced high-sensitivity DNA technology. In 2016, Hahn and her team realized additional evidence could be tested. They conducted familial DNA testing in April of 2019. By July, there was a fresh list of potential suspects. There was evidence from Wendy's clothes and bodily secretions from the crime scene. In 2020, they were able to conduct a familial DNA search. It allows for screening through relatives' DNA profiles. This means anyone sharing the same blood in the family could be accessed if their relative's DNA was on the databank. It brought them to a person, questioned all those years ago, who was 20 years old at the time of Wendy's tragedy. His name was Timothy Williams, their next-door neighbor at the time. Police were able to collect a DNA sample from the suspect secretly while he was in Florida. The sample matched the DNA evidence from the crime scene. 36 years later, they finally had a positive match. Williams was finally arrested on September 9, 2020. Hahn was among the investigators who called Marlene. Marlene had remarried Wayne when he was diagnosed with cancer. He passed away in 2011. 36 years after that Thanksgiving night, on a regular Thursday, she received the call she had longed for. Timothy Williams became the first person in the state to go on trial with an arrest relying on familial DNA. During the trial, Williams claimed he had consensual intimacy with Wendy and did not harm her. He expressed fear of being charged with forceful assault if he came forward. He had been questioned all those years ago. He was a neighbor back then, 20 years old, but he lied to the police. Now in custody, he told a very different story. He said he met her at a corner store and believed her to be of age and was in a relationship with her. However, the district attorney countered these claims, highlighting the brutal nature of Wendy's injuries, which contradicted Williams's story. Wendy's mother had the following to say about his claims. "My daughter Wendy was the sweetest, the most caring little girl in the whole world. I just want everybody to know, no matter what was said, it was not true, and she was and always will be my heart." Initially, the trial faced a setback with a mistrial due to juror misconduct. However, a subsequent trial led to Williams being found guilty of 3 counts of second-degree slaying. On April 17, 2024, New York State Supreme Court Justice Alex Renzi sentenced the 60-year-old Williams to 25 years to life in the New York State Department of Corrections. District Attorney Dorley expressed relief and gratitude to the Rochester police investigators, stating that the maximum sentence was the only appropriate action. She emphasized that after all these years, Timothy Williams did not escape justice for the heinous acts he committed against Wendy. Wendy's mother, Marlene, attended the court proceedings and, after the guilty verdict, expressed a bittersweet sense of closure. After 36 years, Timothy Williams believed he got away with it, but thanks to Julie Hahn's relentless pursuit of the truth and a mother's conviction to justice, he was named, shamed, and put behind bars where he belonged. Finally, Wendy Jerome's family had some closure, and the faceless monster from their dreams was caged. Marlene's last words after the sentencing were, "Will it ever be over for me? No, but this door is closed." It was the evening of July 9, 1994. Teenager Tiffany was looking forward to dinner that night. Our mother had called around 5:30 p.m. to tell her she would be home for dinner after a quick stop at her ex-boyfriend's house. Tiffany was okay with it because there was plenty of time before dinner. They were going to be joined by a guest, so there was time to prepare. Little did she know that was the last time she would hear her mother's voice. 34-year-old single mother Kimberly Langwell did not show up for dinner that night. Her new boyfriend, Ken Weatherford, went out looking for her. He found something strange. Her car was abandoned at a pharmacy, yet there was no sign of Kimberly. Where did she go? Born on Valentine's Day, February 14, 1965, in Beaumont, Texas, Kimberly Langwell grew up and spent most of her life there. She was incredibly attractive from a very young age and had all kinds of attention. Finding herself pregnant at only 18 years old, Kimberly did not give up on life. She raised Tiffany alone and made ends meet by working various jobs. She finally found work at a chemical plant, which meant she did not have to work 3 jobs anymore. A mobile oil refinery, to be precise. She wanted to give her daughter the best life that she could. Kimberly had just gotten out of a bad relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, Terry Rose, regretted many things about their relationship, one of which was being physically abusive toward Kimberly. After living together for 7 years, the two split up, something Tiffany welcomed as she was not happy with her mother dating this man from the start. But the two remained on civil terms, friends, if one could call it that. There are various stories about what really happened between Terry and Kimberly. According to Kimberly's sister, Susan, he was increasingly possessive to the point where Kimberly did not feel safe with him. She even warned her family that if anything happened to her, they should suspect him, as he had threatened her life and exhibited violent behavior. Kimberly had gone as far as providing potential locations where her body might be found if she went missing. But others said Kimberly cheated on him with a friend, causing them to go their separate ways. Yet Terry showered her with expensive gifts. Lovesick, he would give her cash and presents, like a $500 vacation trip to Cancun, just to get her back. But the trip she said she would go on with girlfriends turned out to be a vacation with a new man. Terry was bitter, but he remained civil. Kimberly was quite openly dating someone new now. Ken Weatherford was a whole new chapter in her life. They worked together and had a much better relationship than what she had with Terry. Kimberly usually got off work at 5 p.m. Between 5:15 and 5:30, she told her daughter she would stop by Terry's house to help him. He was remodeling his house, and Kimberly was going to assist him in hanging up boards. When she left the house for work that day, she was wearing a white shirt with the words Cozumel on the front and a diver on the back. It was a shirt she got from her Cancun trip with Ken. She paired it with blue jeans and white tennis shoes. She wore a silver-toned Seiko watch with glowing numbers on it and a silver necklace with an angel pendant. She finished her look with silver hoop earrings and a gold wedding band she wore to avoid attention from men. An hour later, Tiffany started to worry. Kimberly was not answering any calls on her cell phone. She always kept her phone nearby. When Kimberly did not arrive home on time, her worried daughter called the ex-boyfriend to inquire about her mother. He claimed Kimberly had already left and then began angrily questioning Tiffany about why he was not invited to dinner. He showed more concern for the dinner snub than for Kimberly's absence. Tiffany notified Kimberly's current boyfriend, Ken, that her mother never showed up for dinner. Concerned, he went looking for her at local shops, bars, and regular hangouts. He found her 1994 Nissan Altima abandoned at an Eckerd's pharmacy located at the corner of Dallin Road and Flynn Boulevard. Her purse and keys were missing, but her cell phone and other personal items were left in the car. This was highly suspicious, since Kimberly was known to always be on her phone. Given her fear of her ex-boyfriend, it seemed unlikely she would part with her cell phone, especially if she needed to contact her daughter in an emergency. Extensive searches around the abandoned car brought about no clues to where she was. Back in 1999, surveillance cameras were not as readily available as they are today, so there were no camera recordings to review. There were no signs of a struggle or any evidence released by the police, although they suspected foul play. Kimberly's last known phone call was with her daughter, Tiffany. Since that call, she has never been heard from again by friends or family. Kimberly's family was devastated, and her brother Norman took it upon himself to investigate her disappearance. He set up a personal database, collecting data and evidence in hopes of finding his sister. Family and friends were sure that Kimberly would never have willingly left her daughter, whom she raised on her own and was very close to. Kimberly's siblings, Susan and Norman, tirelessly put up flyers and worked to spread the word about her disappearance. Their efforts were driven by the certainty that Kimberly would not have abandoned her daughter or her life. Dee Dee Keene, a survivor of kidnapping and assault, spent years trying to help Kimberly's family. She and her husband could be seen handing out flyers for Kimberly each year dedicatedly. Ken was quickly ruled out as a suspect since he had alibis and was actively involved in the investigation. But officers focused on Terry Rose, whom she had lived with for 7 years, just 6 months before her disappearance. Terry managed a wrecking yard and towing operation in Beaumont called Terry's Wrecker Service. It was easy to dispose of a body. Initially, he said Kimberly stopped by to help him hang boards. Kimberly had told a friend she would stop by Terry's house to pick up her personal items. Perhaps seeing her in a Cancun shirt reminded him of her betrayal. He had also conveniently told the officers he was home alone before he went to the Corner Pocket pool hall that shared a parking lot with the Eckerd Pharmacy. He went around 9:45 p.m., and so he already had an explanation of why his car might be spotted there. Another suspect was Kimberly's co-worker, 49-year-old Frank McCormick. He was a supervisor at the Mobil Oil Refinery and married. Yet he had an obsessive infatuation with Kimberly. He wrote her a number of love letters, and in 1999, Kimberly gave those letters to a friend for safekeeping. He offered her thousands of dollars so that she could take a trip to Europe with her daughter. Yet he was cleared as a suspect as well, after years of investigation. He had receipts from 1999, where he bought chips from a grocery store for a poker night with friends. Kimberly's family, particularly her sister, strongly believed that Terry was responsible for her disappearance. Although his name never came up on websites, Susan's blog mentioned him repeatedly as the prime suspect. It all started when she called Terry to inform him of Kimberly's disappearance. His response was bitter and cold. "Good. Now you will see how I feel." Later, he called to announce he was taking a lie detector test, yelling aggressively at the family. 3 months after Kimberly went missing, Terry called the house and, in an overly cheerful tone, asked if they had heard from Kim lately. This call deeply disturbed the family. In November 2002, he approached Tiffany, Kimberly's daughter, and asked if she had heard from her mother. Kimberly's sister immediately called him to confront his sick behavior. During this call, he revealed that he had failed a lie detector question about whether he had taken the life of Kimberly. Terry's actions, including his insensitive remarks and tormenting behavior, only intensified the family's suspicions and their pain. Despite the lack of concrete evidence tying him to Kimberly's disappearance, they were sure he did it. Shockingly, 5 years after the disappearance of Kimberly, Terry Rose's father was fatally clubbed with a candlestick. He took his last breaths at his door. The assailant was never found. But that seemed irrelevant to detectives. They believed she could have simply been abducted from the pharmacy by a stranger or have been taken by a serial assailant. A new team of investigators started the investigation from the beginning and came across some incriminating information. Reliable information came through in April of 2024. A former employee at Terry's Wrecker Service said he saw Kimberly's car on July 9, 1999 at 5:50 p.m. By 6:20 p.m., her car was gone. This was an important piece of information because it placed her near Terry. That same month, a trip to the police would turn out to be the break they were waiting for. The informant, who remained anonymous, said Kimberly was buried at Terry's house. A warrant was obtained to search his wrecking yard and his residence at the 1600 block of Lindbergh Drive. The FBI assisted the police with ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. The search warrant was executed on Monday, June 10, 2024. The officers found a 3-foot by 5-foot area with no steel rebar under a bedroom floor. The bedroom belonged to Terry's son. It was obviously cut out, and according to the investigators, it was a perfect size for a body to be buried in. The wire and mesh rebar had been cut out. Police found human remains on the property around 3 a.m. Thursday, June 13th. They were hastily wrapped in a blanket. There was not anything left to identify, but the remains were sent to the lab for testing. After all these years of running free while having done something so horrible, Terry Rose's luck was up. He was arrested the very same day. 25 years later, the perpetrator was finally in the grasp of the law. There was nothing to save Terry now. With his smug remarks and snarky comments about Kimberly's disappearance, all those years of gloating were over. 67 years old now, he would spend the remainder of his life behind bars where he belonged. This find brought some closure to Kimberly Langwell's family, who could finally bury her as intended. Her daughter Tiffany expressed her gratitude to finally having her mother's remains back. She said, "I have known that since the day that she was gone, she has been there. So it is tough. It is tough to know where your mom is, and there is nothing you can do." Terry Rose is currently being held in custody on $1 million bail. If he posts bail and leaves, he must wear a GPS monitoring anklet and cannot leave Jefferson County.